The last $50 bill in Alara's wallet felt flimsy, almost transparent, beneath the weight of her date's gaze. It was a crisp, mocking reminder of her limitations, tucked away for an emergency that was rapidly becoming a reality. Across the small, linen-draped table, Mark droned on about his portfolio, his voice a smooth, self-satisfied hum that grated against the anxious thrumming in Alara's chest. He had ordered a bottle of wine, a deep, blood-red Merlot, without consulting her, the price of which she'd glimpsed on the menu. $48. Her entire budget, swallowed by fermented grapes before they had even ordered appetizers. And the beauty of the market right now, Mark said, swirling the wine in his glass, is that it separates the people who know how to build real wealth from everyone else. He looked at her, a glint in his eye that was meant to be charming but felt like an audit. What is it you do again? Something with baking? I'm a baker's assistant at a local grocery store, Alara replied, her voice quieter than she intended. She kept her hands laced in her lap, trying to project a calm she did not feel. And I do custom cakes on the side for birthdays, for small weddings, for any little joy that could help pay the rent on her tiny apartment and buy art supplies for her 7-year-old son, Liam. Right? Quaint, he said, the word landing like a pat on the head. He took a long, performative sip of the wine. It must be tough. A single mom with a hobby. The knot in her stomach tightened. It wasn't a hobby. It was her lifeline, her dream. The one thing that was entirely hers. She thought of the worn, flour-dusted recipe book her grandmother had left her, its pages filled with spidery script and the ghosts of sweet aromas. That book was her inheritance, more valuable to her than any stock portfolio. At the adjacent table, a man sat alone. Julian Vance had come to this quiet, unassuming restaurant to escape the cavernous silence of his own home. He was supposed to be reviewing quarterly reports, but the sterile black and white of the documents blurred into meaninglessness. He was the CEO of Vance Industries, a titan of logistics and technology, a man whose decisions affected thousands of employees and billions of dollars. Yet, he couldn't seem to manage the quiet grief that had settled over his house like dust since his wife, Catherine, had passed away 2 years ago. He couldn't manage the hollowed-out look in his children's eyes. He'd been absently listening to the conversation next to him, initially annoyed by the man's pompous tone. But then he'd focused on the woman. He saw the subtle way she straightened her spine when the man called her work a hobby. He saw the careful, almost reverent way she unfolded her napkin, as if it were a precious textile. There was a quiet dignity about her, a resilience that radiated from her like warmth from a hearth. He saw her glance at the bill the waiter had discreetly placed on the edge of their table, and he saw the flicker of panic in her eyes, so quick he might have missed it if he hadn't been watching so closely. Mark followed her gaze. "Ah, the damage," he chuckled, making no move to reach for it. He drained his glass. "Well, this has been an experience. I have an early start tomorrow. You know how it is," he stood, smoothing his tailored suit jacket. "You can handle this, right? It's only fair, since I picked the place." Alara stared at him, speechless. The bill was for $87. The wine, a salad he'd barely touched, and the bread basket. She had 50. A cold dread washed over her. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the humiliation coiling in her gut. She simply nodded, unable to form the words to argue, to protest this casual cruelty. She just wanted him to leave. He gave a curt nod and walked away, disappearing into the city night without a backward glance. Alara sat alone, the white slip of paper on the table feeling as heavy as a tombstone. She opened her purse, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled out her $50 bill and the few singles she had. $53. Not even close. What would she do? Ask to wash dishes? The thought was mortifying. She squeezed her eyes shut, picturing Liam's face, and a fresh wave of shame hit her. She had wanted one night, just one night, to feel like a normal adult, and it had culminated in this. "Excuse me." Her eyes snapped open. The man from the next table was standing there. He was tall, with dark hair silvering at the temples and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He was dressed in a simple but exquisitely cut dark suit. He gestured toward the bill. "My apologies for intruding," he said, his voice low and calm. "I couldn't help but overhear. That man is a disgrace." He didn't wait for her to respond. He discreetly pulled a card from his wallet, a sleek black rectangle, and handed it to the approaching waiter. "Please put this lady's bill on my tab, and bring her a pot of chamomile tea." The waiter nodded, taking the card without a word. Alara was frozen, a protest dying on her lips. The man's gesture was so swift, so devoid of pity or condescension, that it left no room for argument. "You don't have to do that," she finally managed to say, her voice husky. "I know," he said, his gaze softening slightly. "Consider it a tax on bad manners." His "not yours," he gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. No one should have their evening ruined by a man like that. He returned to his table, and a few moments later, the waiter brought her a steaming pot of tea. The fragrant steam felt like a balm. She drank it slowly, her heart rate gradually returning to normal. The man paid his bill and stood to leave. As he passed her table, he paused. He was shrugging on a heavy wool overcoat. The night was colder than expected. He looked at her thin cardigan, clearly inadequate for the biting November wind. Without a word, he took off his coat and draped it over the back of her chair. "It's cold out," he said simply. "My car is just outside. I won't need it." And then he was gone, leaving her wrapped in the lingering scent of cedar and clean linen. His dark gray coat a silent, comforting weight on her chair. Alara touched the soft wool, a gesture of kindness from a stranger that felt more profound than any grand romantic overture. She was left with a paid bill, a cup of tea, and a coat that felt like a shield against more than just the cold. 2 weeks later, the kindness of the stranger was a warm but fading memory, overshadowed by the stark reality of a notice from her landlord. A rent increase. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to tip her precarious budget over the edge. Her job at the grocery store was stable but paid little. Her cake business was growing but inconsistent. She needed something more. Desperate, she scoured online job boards, scrolling past corporate positions and technical roles that felt like a foreign language. Then she saw it. Personal assistant/household manager needed for busy executive. Must be organized, discreet, and good with children. The salary listed was more than she made in 2 months. It felt impossibly out of reach, but the phrase "good with children" was a hook. That was something she knew. She could soothe a scraped knee, build a magnificent pillow fort, and tell a bedtime story that could calm the most troubled little mind. With a surge of what felt like foolish hope, she updated her sparse resume and sent it off, expecting nothing. To her utter shock, she received a call the next day from a crisp, professional woman named Evelyn, scheduling an interview. The address was in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, a world away from her own modest walk-up. When she arrived, a gleaming glass and steel tower loomed over a quiet, tree-lined street. The lobby was a symphony of marble and hushed efficiency. Evelyn met her there, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and led her to a penthouse apartment that seemed to float above the city. The space was beautiful, minimalist, and achingly silent. It felt less like a home and more like a museum. "Mr. Vance will be with you shortly," Evelyn said, gesturing to a sleek leather sofa. "He's just finishing a call." Alara sat, her hands clutching her purse. She felt impossibly small and out of place. She could hear the faint sounds of a television from another room. A moment later, a little girl, no older than 5, wandered into the living room, clutching a well-loved stuffed bear. She had enormous, sad brown eyes. She stopped and stared at Alara. "Hello?" Alara said softly, giving her a small smile. "I'm Alara. And who is this?" She gestured to the bear. The girl hugged the bear tighter. "Barnaby," she whispered. "Barnaby looks like a very good listener," Alara said. "My son, Liam, has a giraffe named Gus. Gus is very good at keeping secrets." A tiny smile touched the girl's lips. Just then, a boy of about 9 or 10 appeared in the doorway. He had the same serious eyes as the little girl, and he stood protectively, his arms crossed. "Mia, you're not supposed to bother the guests," he said, his voice solemn. "She's not bothering me," Alara assured him. "We were just introducing our friends." The boy looked at her, his expression unreadable. At that moment, a man walked into the room, ending a call on his phone. "Evelyn, has the—" He stopped short. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, met hers. It was him, the man from the restaurant, Julian Vance. Recognition dawned on his face as well. A flicker of surprise, then something else. Curiosity. He was dressed more casually now, in a soft cashmere sweater and trousers, but he still carried an aura of quiet authority. "You," he said, his voice holding a note of disbelief. "You left your coat," Alara said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. It was the first thing she thought of. The beautiful wool coat was cleaned and hanging in a garment bag in her closet, waiting for a miracle that would allow her to return it. A slow smile spread across Julian's face, reaching his eyes and warming them. "So I did." He looked at his children, who were watching the exchange with wide-eyed silence, then back at Alara. Evelyn hovered in the background, looking utterly perplexed. "Leo, Mia, this is Ms. Alara," Julian said, his tone softening as he addressed his children. "She's here to talk with me." The interview was unlike any Alara had ever had. He barely glanced at her resume. Instead, he asked her about Liam. He asked what she liked to bake. He watched, with an unnerving intensity, as she spoke to Mia, coaxing the little girl into a conversation about her favorite color, pink, but also sparkly rainbow. He saw how Leo, his perpetually guarded son, seemed to uncoil slightly in her presence, his defensive posture relaxing. Alara found herself talking about her grandmother's recipe book, about how the smell of cinnamon and rising dough felt like home. She spoke of her dream to one day open a small bakery, a place filled with warmth and light. She didn't try to impress him with corporate jargon or feigned experience. She was just herself. Julian had been interviewing candidates for a week. They were all impeccably qualified, with degrees and glowing references. But they had all spoken to his children with a detached, professional sweetness that felt hollow. They saw Leo and Mia as part of the job description. Alara saw them as children. He had felt a pull toward her that night in the restaurant, a sense of her innate decency. Seeing her now, in his home, interacting so naturally with the two people who mattered most to him, solidified that instinct. He hired her on the spot. Evelyn looked as though he had just announced he was joining the circus. "But Mr. Vance," Evelyn protested later, in the privacy of his office, "her resume. She has no formal experience in household management." "She has experience in kindness," Julian replied, looking out the window at the city below. "And right now, this house needs that more than it needs an expert in scheduling." He thought of the coat, still unreturned. Felt like a promise. The first few days were a period of quiet observation for everyone. Alara learned the rhythms of the vast, silent apartment. Leo was withdrawn, spending hours in his room drawing elaborate, dark cityscapes. Mia was a shadow, her laughter a rare and startling sound. Julian was a ghost, leaving before the children woke and returning long after they were in bed, the faint scent of coffee and exhaustion clinging to him. Alara knew she couldn't fix their grief, but she could fill the silence. She started in the kitchen, a gleaming, state-of-the-art space that felt cold and unused. She found organic flour and forgotten bags of chocolate chips in the pantry. The first afternoon, she baked simple oatmeal cookies. The warm, sweet smell of cinnamon and melting sugar curled through the apartment, a scent of life and comfort in a place that had none. Mia was the first to appear, drawn by the aroma. She stood in the doorway, clutching Barnaby. "It smells like my grandma's house," she whispered. "Would you and Barnaby like to be official taste testers?" Alara asked, holding out a warm, gooey cookie. Mia took it, her small fingers brushing against Alara's. A connection, small but real. Leo followed soon after, drawn by his sister's uncharacteristic giggling. He refused a cookie but lingered, watching as Alara showed Mia how to press fork marks into a ball of peanut butter dough. That evening, when Julian came home, he stopped in the entryway. For the first time in 2 years, his home smelled like a home. He followed the scent to the kitchen, where he found 2 small, half-eaten cookies and a glass of milk on the counter, with a note scrawled in a child's handwriting. For Papa, it was from Mia. He couldn't remember the last time she had done something like that. Still, a part of him remained cautious. He was a man who trusted data and verified results, not just instinct. His world was filled with people who wanted something from him. He had to be sure about Alara. A few days later, he devised a small, quiet test. Before leaving for a meeting, he placed his wallet on the kitchen island, a place he never left it. It was thick with cash from a recent trip, several $1,000s. He told Alara he was running late and rushed out, leaving it in plain sight. From his office, he pulled up the discreet security feed from the kitchen camera on his laptop, feeling a pang of guilt for his own cynicism. He watched as Alara came in to clear the breakfast dishes. She saw the wallet immediately. She stopped, picked it up, and without a moment's hesitation, without so much as a glance inside, she walked straight out of the kitchen. A minute later, his assistant, Evelyn, buzzed his intercom. "Mr. Vance? Alara just brought your wallet down. She said you must have left it behind. She was worried you'd need it." Julian closed the laptop, a wave of shame and relief washing over him. The shame was for his doubt. The relief was for being proven wrong. Her integrity was as clear and solid as he had sensed. That evening, he came home early. He found Alara on the living room floor with Leo and Mia, surrounded by pillows and blankets. They were building a fort. Laughter, genuine and unrestrained, echoed in the room. It was a sound he thought he might never hear again. He stood in the doorway unseen and just listened. The fort building became a regular occurrence. So did the baking. The kitchen, once sterile, was now a warm, creative hub. There were smudges of flour on the counters and the delightful chaos of children learning to crack eggs. Leo started drawing again, but his dark cityscapes were now punctuated by bright splashes of color. A yellow sun, a green park, a small bakery with a striped awning. He shyly gave one to Alara, a drawing of her, him, and Mia holding hands. She taped it to the gleaming stainless steel refrigerator, the first personal touch in a house of curated perfection. One evening, after the children were asleep, Julian found Alara in the kitchen, carefully transcribing a recipe into a new notebook. Her grandmother's book, its spine cracked and its pages stained with vanilla and thyme, lay open beside her. "What's that one?" he asked, his voice soft. "Lemon and lavender shortbread," she said, looking up with a smile. "It was my grandmother's favorite. She used to say it tasted like sunshine." She traced the faded script with her finger. "She passed away when I was a teenager. This book, it's all I really have left of her. My husband, my ex-husband, he never understood. He called it my dusty old book." It was the first time she had mentioned her ex. The words hung in the air, laden with a history of quiet pain and dismissed dreams. Julian felt a surge of anger at this faceless man who had failed to see the treasure he'd had. "He was a fool," Julian said, the words more forceful than he intended. He looked at the book, then at her. "This isn't a dusty old book. It's a legacy." He found himself opening up in return, the quiet intimacy of the late-night kitchen dissolving his usual reserve. He told her about Catherine, about her vibrant laugh and her passion for gardening. He confessed his deepest wound, the guilt. He had been so consumed with building his empire that he had missed so much. He'd been in a meeting in Shanghai when she got the diagnosis. He'd been closing a deal in London when she'd had her last good day. "I thought I was building a future for them," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "But I was missing their present. By the time I realized what truly mattered, it was too late." Alara listened, her expression full of an empathy that asked for nothing in return. She didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. She simply said, "You're here now, Julian. You're present now. They feel that." And he started leaving work at 5. He attended Leo's parent-teacher conferences. He learned to identify the different types of sparkly rainbow colors Mia loved. He and Alara fell into a comfortable rhythm, sharing quiet dinners after the kids were in bed, talking about everything and nothing. The line between employer and employee blurred, replaced by the stronger, more intricate lines of friendship and something deeper. It was a slow, gentle blooming, a found family taking root in the once barren soil of their shared grief. He brought her son, Liam, over to meet his kids. The 3 children, initially shy, were soon thick as thieves, their laughter a constant, joyful melody in the apartment. The fragile peace was shattered by the flash of a camera. They had taken the children to a fall festival in the park, a simple, happy afternoon of caramel apples and hayrides. Julian had been laughing, a genuine, carefree laugh, as he pushed Mia and Liam on a swing. Alara was watching, her heart full, when she saw it. A man with a long-lens camera, half hidden behind a tree. A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. The next morning, the photo was splashed across a notorious gossip blog. Billionaire CEO Julian Vance finds love downstairs. Vance's mysterious new nanny comforts the grieving tycoon. The article was a toxic mix of speculation and innuendo, painting Alara as a conniving gold digger and Julian as a predator taking advantage of his vulnerable employee. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The story was picked up by more mainstream outlets. The board of directors at Vance Industries convened an emergency meeting. Donors for the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala, which Julian was chairing, began to call, expressing concern over the optics. "The board is panicking, Julian," Evelyn told him, her face grim. "They're talking about morality clauses about the company's image. They think this makes you look reckless." "Reckless?" Julian's voice was dangerously low. "I'm the happiest I've been in years. My children are laughing again. And that's reckless." "It's not about what's true," Evelyn said, her voice softening. "It's about the perception. They're pressuring you to handle it, to let her go." The pressure was immense. Julian was a man who had built his life on control and strategic thinking. But this wasn't a business problem with a logical solution. This was his life. This was Alara. Firing her felt like a betrayal not just of her, but of himself, of the new, better man he was becoming. He was torn between the world he had built and the home she had helped him rediscover. The night of the charity gala arrived, the air thick with tension. Alara had insisted on staying home with the children. The media frenzy had terrified her, and she wanted to shield herself and Liam from the glare of the spotlight. Before he left, Julian found her in the kitchen, nervously wiping down an already pristine counter. "I don't want to cause you any trouble, Julian," she said, not looking at him. Maybe the board is right. Maybe it would be better if I left." "No," he said, his voice firm. He walked over to her, gently taking the cloth from her hands. "Don't even think that." He looked into her eyes, his own filled with a fierce determination. "Let me handle this." The gala was a glittering affair, a sea of diamonds and forced smiles. The air crackled with whispers. Julian could feel the eyes on him, the judgment disguised as polite curiosity. He delivered his opening remarks, his voice steady as he spoke about the importance of the hospital, of providing a safe haven for children. During the question-and-answer session that followed, a reporter from a notoriously aggressive tabloid stood up. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Your commitment to children is admirable, but many are questioning your judgment when it comes to your own household. Can you comment on the nature of your relationship with your domestic staff?" A collective gasp went through the room. The flashbulbs popped, a blinding, predatory storm. Evelyn, standing in the wings, shot him a panicked look. This was it, the moment of truth. The PR-approved answer was on the teleprompter. A bland, evasive statement about privacy and employee confidentiality. Julian looked at the teleprompter, then out at the sea of expectant faces. He thought of Alara's quiet strength, of the flower on her cheek, of the way she had taped Leo's drawing to the refrigerator. He thought of the sound of his children's laughter, and in that moment the choice became devastatingly simple. He stepped away from the podium, closer to the edge of the stage, his microphone in hand. The room fell silent. "Thank you for the question," he began, his voice ringing with a clarity that commanded attention. "You ask about my domestic staff. Let me tell you about a woman named Alara. She is a baker, an artist, and the kindest, most principled person I have ever met. She came into my home, a home that was dark and silent with grief, and she filled it with light and laughter. She didn't do it for a salary. She did it because that is who she is." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the stunned audience. "You want to know about the nature of our relationship? The nature of our relationship is decency. It's integrity. It's two people helping each other heal. It's a woman who taught my children, and me, that a home isn't about the size of the building, but the size of the heart within it." He looked directly at the reporter. "So, to answer your question, I am not her employer. I am the luckiest man in the world, because she is my friend, my partner, and the woman I am falling in love with. And if anyone in this room or on my board has a problem with that, then they have a problem with me. Because her character is worth more than this company's entire market cap." He set the microphone down on the podium with a soft thud that echoed like a gavel in the silent room. Then he turned and walked off the stage, leaving behind a torrent of shocked whispers and frantic reporters. Alara had watched the whole thing on a live news feed on her laptop, her heart pounding in her chest. His words, so public and unwavering, were a shield, but they also solidified her fear. She had brought this chaos into his world, a world he had worked so hard to build. The love and respect she felt for him were so immense that she knew what she had to do. She couldn't let him sacrifice his empire for her. It was too much. With tears streaming down her face, she wrote a short, simple note. She packed a small bag for herself and a sleeping Liam, carrying him out to a taxi she had called. She left behind the beautiful apartment, the warm kitchen, and the family that had started to feel like her own. In the note, she wrote, "You are the kindest man I have ever known. That is why I have to leave. Your children deserve a father whose world isn't being torn apart because of me. Thank you for everything." When Julian raced home, the adrenaline from his speech still coursing through him, he found the apartment silent again. The silence was different this time. It was the hollow, aching silence of absence. He saw the note on the kitchen island, next to her grandmother's recipe book, which she had left behind. His world tilted on its axis. He had made his stand only to lose the very person he was fighting for. He sank onto a kitchen stool, his head in his hands. He had never felt so alone. A few minutes later, small footsteps padded into the room. It was Leo with Mia trailing behind him. Leo was holding a piece of paper. "She forgot this," Leo said, his voice trembling. He held out a new drawing. It was a picture of a house, a real house with a yard and a smoking chimney. In the drawing were 5 figures, all holding hands. Julian, Leo, Mia, Alara, and a smaller boy with curly hair, Liam. Above them, Leo had written, "The Vance family." Mia stepped forward, clutching Barnaby. Her lower lip was quivering. "Alara promised we would make star cookies tomorrow," she said, her voice a small, broken whisper. "She can't be gone. She promised." The child-led truth hit Julian with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't about his company or the media or the board. It was about this new family they had all started to build. It was about promises and star cookies. He looked at the drawing, at the simple, profound hope captured in his son's crayon strokes. He knew where she would be. He found her at her old apartment building, a rundown walk-up that seemed a world away from his penthouse. She was just getting a sleepy Liam out of the taxi. He stood on the pavement, the city lights blurring around him. She looked up and saw him, her eyes wide with shock and sorrow. He didn't rush to her. He just walked slowly, deliberately, until he was standing in front of her on the cracked sidewalk. He didn't have a grand speech prepared. The words he had spoken at the gala were for the world. The words he had now were just for her. "The kids miss you," he said, his voice raw. "Leo drew a picture of our family. You're in it." He took a shaky breath. "I miss you. Don't run from me, Alara. Please, come home." Tears welled in her eyes. "Julian, your work, your company. It's just a building filled with desks," he said, shaking his head. "You and Liam and Leo and Mia, you're my home. I was just living in a building before. You taught me how to live in a home." He reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I need you." The aftermath of Julian's speech was not what the board had feared. His bold, heartfelt stand had gone viral. He was lauded not as a reckless CEO, but as a man of principle. Support flooded in. The gala raised a record-breaking amount of money. The narrative had shifted from scandal to an inspiring modern love story. The board, faced with overwhelmingly positive public opinion and a CEO who had never been more resolute, quietly backed down. With the public storm calmed, they focused on the private joy of building their new life. Liam moved into the penthouse, his laughter joining the melody of Leo's and Mia's. Alara, no longer an employee but a partner, transformed the apartment. Family photos appeared on the walls. The children's artwork was framed. The whole place began to breathe. But Alara's dream of her own bakery still lingered. She spoke of it not as a business, but as a way to create a community hub, a place of warmth. Julian, ever the strategist but now guided by his heart, saw an opportunity. "Let's think bigger," he said one evening, as they sat together on the sofa, looking over her grandmother's book. "What if we could create dozens of places like that?" Together, they drew up a plan. They established the Catherine Vance Foundation, in honor of his late wife, with a new, singular mission: to fund and support community kitchens in underserved neighborhoods. These weren't just soup kitchens. They were culinary training centers, bakeries, and cafes that would provide jobs, teach skills, and serve as warm, welcoming gathering places. Alara's grandmother's recipe book became the foundational curriculum, its pages of simple, nourishing recipes now a blueprint for hope. They worked side by side, a true team. He brought his business acumen and resources. She brought her vision, her heart, and her unparalleled lemon and lavender shortbread. They visited potential sites, met with community leaders, and tasted bread baked in fledgling ovens. Their purpose was shared, their mission clear. It was a partnership that extended far beyond the walls of their home. Several months later, on a quiet Tuesday evening, the family was in the kitchen. It was their sanctuary, the heart of their home. Flour dusted every surface. Alara was showing Liam and Mia how to crimp the edges of a pie crust, while Leo was meticulously arranging apple slices in a concentric pattern. Julian stood back, watching the chaotic, beautiful scene. Alara was laughing, a smudge of flour on her nose, her eyes sparkling with a light that he now knew was the center of his universe. This was it. This was wealth. Not the numbers on a stock ticker, but this moment. The smell of apples and cinnamon. The sound of his children's happy chatter. The presence of the woman who had rebuilt his world. He walked over to her. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't have a velvet box. He simply took her flour-dusted hands in his. "I had a new cover made for this," he said softly, nodding toward a beautifully bound leather book on the counter. It was her grandmother's recipe book, painstakingly restored and protected. On the new cover, embossed in simple gold leaf, were the words, "The Vance Family Recipes." Her eyes filled with tears as she touched the letters. "It's a legacy," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, echoing the words he had spoken to her on one of their first nights together in this very kitchen. "Our legacy. Let's spend the rest of our lives adding new pages to it." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact, a promise. She didn't need to say yes. She just leaned in and kissed him, a sweet, flowery kiss that sealed their future. True value isn't found in what we own or the status we achieve, but in the quiet moments of connection, the shared purpose we build, and the simple, daily choice to love the family we find.